Hi Year 10, welcome back. Hope you're all safe and well. And I want to introduce you today to a new part of the course, and this is really probably one of the most important parts of your course that you're going to do with me over the next few months. And we're going to look at the chemical and physical properties of carbohydrates, proteins and fats. So I'm going to start today with carbohydrates, and I want to just do a very quick recap on things that you learned earlier on in the course with Mrs. Calloway. So first of all, if you remember, all carbohydrates are formed from carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, and the hydrogen and oxygen is in the same proportion as water, hence the name hydrate. Okay, in its simplest form we have monosaccharides. Right, they are single sugars. When you eat sugars, your body digests them down from maybe polysaccharides in the form of starch, then to disaccharides, then to monosaccharides, and then to the actual chemical elements. Right, now the monosaccharides, you probably have heard of glucose. Right, so glucose is a sugar that we find in our blood. It provides us with energy. But obviously it's a component of other sugars as well. So you've got three main monosaccharides. You've got glucose, fructose and galactose. So fructose is a fruit sugar, galactose is milk sugar, and it forms, with glucose it forms lactose. Then you've got disaccharides, they're double sugars, so two monosaccharides joined together. So you've got sucrose, which is this normal sugar, so caster sugar, icing sugar, granulated sugar, brown sugar, they are all sucrose. You've got maltose and you've got lactose. Okay, and then you've got your polysaccharides, which are made up of many units of simple sugars. And the main one that really we talk about is starch, and starch comes in lots of different forms, and I'll talk about that later. But starch basically is long chains of glucose that form into either something called amylose or something called amylopectin, or a mixture of both. Right, so we're going to start today with looking at the properties of sugar. So on a tray here, I've just got some normal granulated sugar, right? It's cane sugar, that means it's produced from sugar cane. And one of the most important properties that sugar has is its ability to caramelise. So if I show you, right, with my blowtorch, okay, and what I want you to look at is what's happening. If I just calm that down a little bit. Right, now can you see there, straight away, the sugar's dissolving, the water's being driven off, and it's changing to different colours, and it's going from very pale yellow, but where I've melted it more, it's going to probably what we associate as caramel colour. And if I keep on doing this, what will happen is all the water will be driven off, and eventually it will burn. Right, so if we just turn that off, wrong way. Right, now you can see on there, it's a bit smelly now, that the sugar's caramelised and it's beginning to carbonise. That means that all the water's been driven off. Now eventually that will thicken and it will set. So it's a really useful thing to use in food. So it's the most common food colouring that you'll get. It makes sugars caramelise in baked products, so it adds to the colour. Okay, so that's sucrose, normal sugar, and that's called, let me show you, there you go, caramelisation. If you can see that, it's actually probably upside down or the wrong way around, but that means the ability of sugars to form caramel. Okay, and your next practical is going to be chocolate caramel shortbread, and you'll see that happen for you in reality. Right, so we've got monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides. Now somewhere in between disaccharides and polysaccharides, we've got something called dextrin. Right, so we've got a piece of bread here, normal white bog standard bread. I've actually put my grill on here. Don't usually use a grill, I usually use a toaster. But I'm just going to pop that under there for a minute. Okay, now what happens is when you toast bread, or you put a cake into the oven, or you put bread into the oven or pastry, the outer layer of starch changes to this substance called dextrin, and what happens is the water's driven off and you get this sort of simpler, easy to digest carbohydrate, polysaccharide called dextrin. Now if I just show you, can you see that's just beginning to take on some colour? So the more I toast it, the more water's driven off, the more dextrinization takes place. So it really is a very useful tool in cooking, because we actually use dextrinization to brown cakes, bread, etc., as I said. So dextrin is this substance which is halfway between a starch and a disaccharide. It's a bit more complex than a disaccharide. So there's my piece of toast, okay? And as you can see, it really has colour. I've only done it on the side, don't need to do it on both, but you can see that the starch has changed to dextrin, and that is now a bit easier to digest. There's quite a simple little thing you can do to show how different dextrin is to starch. Your saliva contains an enzyme called amylase, and amylase begins the breaking down of starch. You take a piece of toast and you chew on it, it will eventually taste quite sweet, and that's because of the amylase working on the dextrin and breaking it down to sugar. Right, the third property we're going to look at is something called gelatinization. Okay, gelatinization is the process where starches thicken a liquid. Okay, and I'm going to show you 3 different starches made from 3 different cereals. I've got something called arrowroot, okay, and that's used to glaze things like fruit tarts. I've got corn flour, which you're all probably very familiar with, and you can use this in a variety of products. You can use it in baking, you use it to thicken lemon meringue, the bit of lemon meringue. It's used as the base of things like Bisto granules, or the Bisto powder that you get to make gravy. Okay, sometimes it's modified, so that means that it can thicken up in something like cold milk, like an instant whip. Okay, and then the third one is flour. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you and talk about gelatinization. So in this pan I've got 10 grams of flour. I've already done this with arrowroot and with corn flour, so I'm going to show you in a minute the difference. So what I'm going to do is just mix flour with a little bit of water. I'm going to use 150 mils. Right, now starch doesn't dissolve in water, so you'll find, or milk, any liquid, it doesn't dissolve very well, and it definitely doesn't thicken unless it's been modified or changed. So I'm putting the rest of the water in there. I'm going to put the heat on, and I'm going to stir constantly. Right, so you would do this if you were making a sauce, maybe like you did when you made lasagna. Okay, so you would make a roux. You'd use a roux, which is sugar, flour and butter, and then you would mix it with the milk, and you'd get just a basic white bechamel sauce. Right, all I'm doing here is what we call a blended sauce, and it's really just to show you the difference between the different starches. So plain flour or flour has large amounts of something called amylose, okay, and very little amylopectin. Amylose makes mixtures thicken. Amylopectin gives clarity, clearness to a gel, right? So when you gelatinize starch, what's happening is you are heating up the liquid, whether it be milk or water. The starch grains are softening, and as they soften, they begin to absorb the water or the milk, and then at about 75 degrees, they begin to, just turn that out a bit, they begin to get so big that they begin to burst, and they begin to thicken the mixture. And if you at that stage don't stir your mixture constantly, you will end up with a lumpy sauce. Okay, so let's go back over that. Plain flour is made up of mainly long chains of amylose. Okay, and amylose is responsible for thickening liquids. Arrowroot is used as a glaze, so you want something that will have a little bit of clarity, and arrowroot will contain much more amylopectin than amylose. Okay, and then corn flour is a bit in the middle. It does go a bit clearer when you thicken it, but it also is it does thicken as opposed to giving a nice clear gel, and I'll show you the difference in a minute. Right, so what's happening now, this is coming up to temperature. The starch granules have got completely, they've absorbed all the liquid. They've got that much liquid in that they're ready to burst, and as they burst they thicken the mixture, and as you stir you'll notice the mixture does get much thicker. Right, if there's lumps, then that's because you haven't stirred enough. Right, so I'm just going to show you that. Right, it's not quite thick enough, but it's getting there. But if I just take that off the heat and just show you, right, so here I've got a gel. That is arrowroot, and you can see it's actually much clearer. If I slide my finger, you can actually see my finger. Whoops. This is corn flour, same amount, 10 grams of arrowroot, 150 mils of water, 10 grams corn flour, 150 mils of water. Can you see that? That's set into a fairly solid gel. Yeah, and that's sort of what you get when you use when you make lemon meringue pie. And then we've got this last one, which is plain flour. Right, I'm not going to put my finger through that one, but if you just have a look here, you can see it's much darker in colour. I'm not very good, I've only got white plates, I needed a darker plate, but it's much darker in colour. And if you just get a spoon, you can see it has thickened. Yeah, so that's gelatinisation. So they're the three properties you need to know about: caramelisation, dextrinisation and gelatinisation. Thank you for listening. Keep safe, and I hopefully will be seeing you soon. Bye, Year 10.